Things like gunshot wounds or snake bites, serious infections, and metabolic diseases of all kinds just make up his daily practice. And because of the miracles that he has really experienced with herbal medicines, Doc Jones has really got an incredible passion to teach others to use these wonderful plants. His focus is on a self-reliant herbalism, which I love and appreciate, with a strong emphasis on using local plants, and again, very important. Doc Jones and his wife, Lori Ann, she's also a naturopath and a licensed midwife, they live and practice in Buell, Idaho. And here's another credential for both of them. They are the parents of 15 biological and adopted children. So, boy, believe me, they've seen everything, broken bones and lacerations and black eyes and runny noses when you got 15 kids. That in itself is an education in medicine. Watch this presentation with Doc Jones as he shows us the 10 common plants that are probably growing in your backyard and how to use them medicinally.
Hi, I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the Homegrown Herbalist School of Botanical Medicine. And in this presentation, we're going to be talking about 10 plants that can change your life. Okay, herbal medicines that are in your own backyard, or could be. So I just want to warn you before we do this, there are some graphic images in this presentation, some wound cases and stuff. So if you got little kids in the room, you may want to preview this before you have them watch it. Or if you're a particularly sensitive soul, you may want to watch this presentation with your eyes shut, because I don't know when those pictures pop up, and I probably won't warn you. But anyway, just be aware of that. So I'm a veterinarian, okay? I'm a practicing veterinarian. I'm also a naturopath, went to naturopathy school. And so I have a veterinary practice, and I have a naturopath practice. I use plants as medicine all the time. I mean, there's very few patients leave my veterinary practice without a jar of herbs, to help them with whatever's going on. And obviously in the naturopath practice, it's even more so that I'm using the herbs. And I've just been really, really pleased with how powerful these plants are. We're really in the trenches doing real work, using these plants every day. Here they are. This is my veterinary clinic, and we have seen remarkable results, really remarkable results with these herbal medicines all the time. And you can too. You can use these plants to affect healing in your own life or in the lives of your loved ones. Or if you get to where you know what you're doing and have some training, hang out your shingle and make a living at it. The plants really are remarkable. So the other thing that's really cool is that they are absolutely everywhere. I mean, we are surrounded by herbal medicines. If you go out in your backyard, you go in your gardens, go to the parks and forests, and anywhere that there's plants, there's medicine. These plants are very common, very easy to find, very easy to collect and harvest, very easy to grow, and very easy to use. And you can do it. You can do amazing things. For example, if you knew 4 plants, you could do this. All right? This is a lady that we mentioned in the other lecture that had a squamous cell carcinoma, a cancer on her scalp, and she had that surgically removed, which I think, again, is a great idea. If somebody says they can make your cancer be gone tomorrow, you want to talk to that guy. Gone is good when it comes to cancer. But then they wanted to do a skin graft. And the skin graft would have left her with, a spot this big on top of her hair that would never grow hair. And that's no good. And so she had seen some other cases I'd worked on, contacted me, and, we just used poultices on that and healed her up. And you can see this last picture here. But that's 4 plants, calendula, comfrey, plantain, and yarrow. And, there were some other plants in that poultice formula. But if you only had those 4, you could do this, all right? That's a good thing to know when your brother-in-law cuts his leg in the apocalypse with a chainsaw because he's being an idiot, right? Wouldn't it be great to have those plants growing in your yard? Here's another case. If you knew 4 plants, you could prevent this from happening. Now, this is a brown recluse spider bite. These venoms are extremely necrotizing to the tissue. They kill the tissue. They liquefy the tissue. And it starts out looking like this in the top picture with the little discoloration. But if you don't get after that and do something about it, in a couple of weeks you have this big ghastly wound. This is the same kind of venom that rattlesnakes have. Okay, all the pit vipers, rattlesnakes, water moccasins, copperheads, hobo spiders, brown recluse spiders, all those venoms have a chemical in them, an enzyme called hyaluronidase. And hyaluronidase dissolves the hyaluronic acid, which is the glue that holds your cells together. Okay, so if your cells are like little bricks, the hyaluronic acid is the mortar that's holding your little bricks together. And these venoms dissolve that mortar, okay? And so you get these really terrible wounds, you know. Spiders don't eat things, they drink things, right? They inject the venom, liquefy the tissue, and then drink you through a straw, all right? That's what spiders do. And rattlesnakes are the same way. They're liquefying that tissue. It kills the prey, but it also makes it easier to digest. And so these wounds can be terrible, and I treat these all the time in my veterinary practice. I don't ever treat them in the naturopathy practice for the people, because people, when they hear that rattlesnake sound, they don't stick their head under the bush and say, "Why are you making that noise?" You know, like the Labradors do. Labradors are dumb, and it's always right on their nose. But anyway, I treated lots of these bites, rattlesnake bites, and in people I've treated hobo bites and brown recluse bites. And we've had really great success, again, with just 4 plants: echinacea, dandelion root, marshmallow, and plantain. I put those on topically as a poultice, grind them up and slap them on, and I give them internally. And I'm going to give that internally, you know, every 3 or 4 hours for the first couple of days. And I'm going to change that poultice several times a day. But I have never, in my experience, seen that bite progress after I start using the herbs. So wherever that bite is when I start, that's where it ends. Okay. I've seen some really remarkable results. Echinacea, I don't know if you've heard of snake oil. You know, it's these days it's sort of a disparaging term for herbal medicines. You know, oh, that's just snake oil. Well, you know what snake oil was? It was echinacea, and it worked really good on snake bites because echinacea inhibits that enzyme that dissolves the tissue, and echinacea stimulates your body to produce more hyaluronic acid, so it's making more mortar to hold your bricks together. So yeah, I'll take the snake oil. Thanks very much. All right, if you knew 4 plants, you could pass one of these. So this is a kidney stone. This is kind of a funny story. I was at a workshop, or it was a convention, you know, and I was giving a lecture, and this guy comes up after the lecture, and he says, "Oh, Doc," he says, "I'm just sick. My wife has been so excited to come and listen to this lecture, and she's home with a kidney stone and can't be here." And I says, "Oh, holy cow!" And I got a piece of paper, and I wrote these herbs on the piece of paper. I says, "Go down there. There's a herb shop just down the road here. Tell them this is what you need, and poke that in your wife, and she'll be all right." So he went and bought the herbs and mixed them up, and gave them to his wife a couple of times that day. And the next morning he texted me this picture. This is the kidney stone that she passed. So again, you know, isn't it great to have access in your own yard or on your own property to plants that can solve a problem like that? And I've knocked out lots of kidney stones over the years just with the weeds growing in my yard. Okay, so people always ask me, what are the 10 most important herbs? You know, Doc, if you could only have 10 herbs, what would they be? And, you know, I don't know. There's so many, and I'm going to give you 10. But you know what? I could give you another 10 that would be just as good, and then I could give you another 10 after that would be just as good. But this is a good list. You know, when I wrote my book, The Homegrown Herbalist, I got a piece of paper and I said, okay, I'm just going to write down the 20 or so herbs that I wouldn't want to live without. And I started writing, and there were like 82 of them, you know. And and I had to whittle that list down to 20. And for this list, I had to whittle it down to 10. And it's excruciating. You know, it's like telling your kids they can't go to Disneyland with you because you decided to take the little car, you know. And so, you know, you've got all these favorites and friends that you've worked with. But anyway, you got to start somewhere. And this group of 10 herbs that I'm going to share with you today really covers almost all of the bases. And these are really particularly powerful plants. And the other thing about these plants is they're really easy to grow. Okay, so these are plants you could have in your yard or your garden, or that you could find in the field next to your house. You know, very common plants. So let's get started. And the number one herb that we're going to have, and these aren't in order of importance, I guess, but the first one we're going to talk about is comfrey. And comfrey is a well-known herb, Symphytum officinale. Symphytum means bones growing together, okay, and the common name for comfrey is knit bone. You know, that's what they used to call it, because it actually will heal bones and cause them to knit back together. It contains a chemical called allantoin, which has two really great properties. One is it's really penetrating, so you can put comfrey as a poultice on a broken bone. You know, even if the skin's not broken, put the poultice on there, and that allantoin will soak right through those tissues and get to those bones. And what it does is it accelerates cell division. Okay, so it just makes those cells divide like crazy, and it really accelerates the healing of those wounds. And so I've used comfrey on all kinds of wounds, you know, really horrible, grisly wounds on dogs. Dogs do the dumbest things. Anyway, and humans too, that have had some nasty wounds that we've healed up using comfrey. And it just really markedly decreases the healing time. And it also causes better contraction and filling, so you get less scarring with the comfrey, smaller scars. So comfrey's great. It's also a really good expectorant, so you can use it for bronchitis cases. And it has a lot of mucilage in it. And mucilage is that slimy, wonderful, soothing stuff that's in marshmallow and slippery elm and, you know, mallow, those kinds of things. Just really soothing to inflamed tissues anywhere in your body. So if you have, you know, gut irritation or sores in your mouth or a sore throat, bladder inflammation, irritated lungs, I mean, it doesn't have to come in direct contact with the tissues. The comfrey is just terrific for any of those kinds of things. It's really good for stomach ulcers. It's really good for any kind of GI problem. It's really good for any kind of wounds, burns, anything like that. It's a good expectorant, just a really tremendous plant. There is some controversy about using comfrey internally. They did a really good study where they took 6-week-old rats and they fed them comfrey extract, not the plant, because that wouldn't make any sense, right? But they took comfrey extract, a concentrated extract, and they fed that to those 6-week-old baby rats as 40% of their diet. And some of those rats got liver lesions. And so I never, ever, personally in my practice, I never use comfrey internally in 6-week-old rats as 40% of their diet. I think that's a good study. I think we've scientifically proven that that's not safe. I do use comfrey internally on my veterinary patients all the time. I've used it internally myself, with my family, with my naturopathy clients, all the time. Never seen a single issue with it. I've never spoken to an herbalist or heard of an herbalist who's had a single issue with it. But you know, there is some risk if you have poor liver function. You know, if you're taking a lot of pharmaceuticals, I probably wouldn't take comfrey internally. I don't give it to pregnant ladies because they got little babies in them with little rat livers. You know, why take a chance? But I think it's vastly emphasized the dangers of taking comfrey internally. I'll tell you, if you want to do something really scary some night, and don't do this with your children because it's pretty terrifying, but some night when it's really dark, maybe stormy outside, get a flashlight and turn out all the lights in your house, and with your flashlight read the warnings on your ibuprofen label. That's scary. Okay, comfrey internally, not so scary for me. But you know what? You pray about it, you think about it, you make your own decisions. Everything is dangerous, right? But it's a risk-benefit analysis. In my assessment, in my practice, in the situations where I use comfrey, I find that the benefits vastly outweigh the risk internally. All right. So how do you grow comfrey? Well, comfrey is pretty easy to grow. In fact, you want to be a little careful where you plant it because it's really easy to grow. And you will never get rid of it. The roots go down about 15 feet, and you'll never be able to dig it up. You'll never be able to kill it unless you use Roundup or something. But make sure it's someplace you like it. This is a picture of one of my comfrey beds, and we've managed to contain the comfrey with about 6 feet of concrete in all directions. But anyway, it spreads, and it's pretty happy, aggressive, and enthusiastic stuff, so be aware of that. One thing you can do is you can use Russian comfrey, and Russian comfrey is a sterile hybrid. So, it's like you take a donkey and a horse and you make a mule, and then the mule can't make any more babies. Same thing here. They took Symphytum officinale, and they took Symphytum uplandicum, and they crossbred those two plants, those two species, and you get this hybrid that can't propagate by seed. And so that's another great way to plant comfrey and have a little more control. It'll still spread gradually by root division over the years, but it's very manageable, and it's nothing like the regular plants that have the little black ping pong balls for seeds, and they just go everywhere. So the Russian comfrey is a good idea, and I've used it a lot, and I find it to be just as effective as the regular stuff. So either of those plants is good. Harvesting comfrey, you want to be really careful when you harvest comfrey not to take more than every single bit of the upper end root, because if you do that, it may take weeks to recover. Anyway, when I harvest comfrey and I'm getting the leaves, I chop it right down to the dirt, and in a week it's back, 2 weeks. If you dig up all the roots you can find, it'll be back in a couple of months. I mean, it's astoundingly resourceful stuff, and like I say, the roots go down a long, long way. You'll never get them all. So, and that's a great way to share comfrey with your friends, is just to give them a piece of the root. Anyway, also you want to wear some gloves when you're harvesting comfrey leaves, because they're kind of bristly and irritating. All right, gumweed, and this is Grindelia. Most people call this Grindelia in the trade. Out here in Idaho, we call it gumweed because the flowers are sticky. That's why they call it gumweed. But gumweed is a truly fantastic plant. The flowers, the medicine, or the buds, but you can use it topically, you can use it internally, and it has some great properties. It's an antibiotic, it's anti-inflammatory, and accelerates healing like comfrey does. Not as strong as comfrey, but quite good. So what a great wound poultice, right? Kills the bugs, decreases the inflammation, makes things heal faster. That's great. The antibiotic can also be used internally for bladder infections or GI infections. Really good for that. And the other thing that's neat about gumweed is it's a really good antispasmodic. So it relaxes muscle spasms. So if you have back spasms, or if you have, I get a rib that pops out of joint once in a while, and the muscles just go nuts and spasm. Gumweed's great for that. It's also really good for asthma, because in addition to being an antispasmodic, it's also a really good expectorant. So expectorants are herbs that get the goobers out of your lungs, right? And so for cases of bronchitis, any kind of a catarrh, where you got a lot of gunk in your lungs and you want to get it out, gumweed's a terrific expectorant, and it's a muscle relaxant. And so for asthma cases, what else do you want? The asthma is a combination of contracture of the muscles on your bronchi and gunk in your bronchi that gets produced because they're irritated and mad because they're having an asthma attack. Okay, so you take the gumweed, it relaxes the muscles and opens up the airways, and it gets the goobers out, and what could be bad? And so it's really quite good for asthma. There's no contraindications as far, so when I say contraindications, I mean, can you take it if you're pregnant? Can you take it if you have high blood pressure? Can you take it if you're left-handed? In other words, cases where you should not take it. I don't know of any contraindications for gumweed. So how do you grow gumweed? Well, the best way to grow gumweed is to take some seeds and put them on the worst dirt you can find, and then when your neighbors ask you about it, just play dumb. I don't know where that came from, right? Because they'll be mad. But it's wonderful stuff, and it's well worth putting in one of your garden boxes, because it just medicinally is so fantastic. Full sun is great. Partial sun is great. And the dirt doesn't matter. If you have really great dirt, grow gumweed. If you have really dry, gravelly, rotten dirt, grow gumweed. It won't care. You'll often find it in real gravelly, disturbed places, on the sides of roads, or, rock quarries and pits and, places where the dirt's been disturbed. Gumweed's one of the first guys to come in and think that's a great place to live. So it's really, really very tolerant of almost any kind of conditions. Harvesting gumweed, you want to harvest the flowers and the buds. That's the medicinal part. It's really hard to dry gumweed because it has a lot of oil in it. And so, you can dry it for months and months and months, and it feels just dry as dry. And you put it in the blender to grind it up, and it just gets to be this hot, steamy, oily mess. And you're not going to get it dry. Don't worry about it. You can tincture it, you can dry it and grind it, but it's not going to dry and grind like a lot of other herbs will. And just live with that. That's just how it is. And then, of course, you can tincture it or make teas or whatever. It doesn't taste great, but it's really, really amazing medicine. One of my favorite plants. All right, coneflowers. So this is purple coneflowers like you get at the nursery, like you've got probably growing in your flower beds. Echinacea. This is echinacea, okay? Black-eyed Susans are also coneflowers, okay? So anything in the genus Echinacea or Rudbeckia is a coneflower, and those plants are Echinacea, essentially. They used to all be in the same genus, but they separated the Echinacea from the Rudbeckia. And the reason they do that is because, they've named everything now. So now the only way to get a master's in botany is to rename everything, right? But black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, there's some wild strains. The yellow coneflower from the western states that's shown in the bottom picture here. Those are all great medicine. So these plants, the root and the flower, both are medicinal. In the United States, we're kind of wound up about the root. We always talk about Echinacea root being the big deal. But in Europe, they use the flower a lot, almost exclusively. And I have found that the flower is almost as good. I mean, I use the flower as much as I use the root. Unless it's a really serious case. If it's a rattlesnake bite case, I might go with the root instead of the flower. But, if it's just for the immune stimulation or something, I just use the flower, and I think they work fine. So what are the properties? Well, it's an immune stimulant, like we said. It's antibacterial. It's really great for those venomous bites that we talked about, rattlesnake bites, copperhead, water moccasin, brown recluse spiders, hobo spiders, because the echinacea, as we said, inhibits the enzymes that are destroying the tissue and stimulates your body to make more hyaluronic acid, right, which is the glue that holds your cells together. Now, echinacea is also good for cartilage injuries because it stimulates hyaluronic acid production, which is mostly what your cartilage is made out of. Okay, so if you have a torn rotator cuff or something like that, echinacea can help those things rebuild as well. It's also good for systemic bacterial infections, sepsis. Anytime you need to support the immune system and kill the bugs, it's much better for bacterial infections, in my experience, than it is for viral infections. People always talk about echinacea for colds and flus, and that's fine. I mean, I'd take it for that. But for bacterial infections, it's really the bomb. I mean, it's really terrific for that. All right. Now, how do you grow coneflowers? Well, these are easy to grow. They're very popular ornamentals for flower beds. Everybody's got them. Just go down to the store. It's hard to grow from seed. Okay, echinacea seeds take a long time to germinate, and they can be hard to start from seeds. But you can buy them at the nursery. Just go down and buy some echinacea plants or some black-eyed Susans. The very best species are Echinacea purpurea and Echinacea angustifolia. And then for the black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta is really good. But, any of those will work. Between the two echinacea species, the Echinacea purpurea is a much better plant to grow because it's just a much more vigorous plant. Echinacea angustifolia is kind of a sissy, and they don't make big plants. They don't make a lot of material. and they're kind of fussy. So if I was going to pick one or the other, I would pick the purpurea. Some people say the angustifolia is a little bit more potent medicinally. I don't know that I've found that to be enough of a deal to make a difference. I use the purpurea almost exclusively and been pretty happy with it. And it makes way more flowers and way more roots, and it's way happier, so it's easier to grow. So harvesting coneflowers, you can just gather the flowers when they're fully bloomed, or, in the fall you can dig up the roots. And it's that simple. Now, for the men that might be listening, I'm just going to give you a tip. Your wife will be much happier if you head out to her flower beds with a pair of scissors instead of with a spade. All right. So, like I said, the flower is almost as good as the root. There's no reason to dig those rascals up. Unless, like I say, unless you had a rattlesnake bite and you really wanted absolutely the best, most concentrated echinacea you could get, the root would be better. But, for everything else, the flower's great. Okay, here's our next one. This is calendula. And calendula is a fantastic plant. If I could only have 5, this would probably be on my list. Along with the other 82 plants, that would be on that list of 5. But calendula, they call it pot marigold sometimes. And this is not the same marigold, the little French marigolds that you have. That's a completely different genus, different plant, different properties. This is the pot marigold, Calendula officinalis. And you may have noticed that the comfrey was also officinalis, right, the species. That's an important thing to make note of. When you see a plant and the species name is officinalis, like, Symphytum officinalis is comfrey, Calendula officinalis is calendula, Althea officinalis is marshmallow, Melissa officinalis is lemon balm. When you see that officinalis name, that's a medicinal plant, all right, because officinalis means from the officina. Okay, and the officina was the little room in the monastery where the monks kept all the medicinal plants. Okay, so when they were naming all the plants, when Linnaeus was naming all the plants, if it was a medicinal plant, he called it officinalis. So that's a word that should be like a little blue light special at Kmart, that something exciting is going on and I need to go look at that and find out what that is. Any plant that has that name, officinalis. So Calendula officinalis, these are tremendous plants. The whole plant's edible. That's why they call it pot marigold. They used to put it in their soups and stews. And principally, the flower is the medicine. Okay, and not just the petals. Some people sell calendula petals, but it's actually the center of the flower is the best part. So if you're going to buy flowers on the internet or something, you want the whole flower. You don't want just the petals to get the strongest medicine. So the flower is the medicine. It's antibacterial, it's antifungal, it's anti-inflammatory. It also accelerates healing the way comfrey does. Not as strong, but it has that property. It's good for menstrual cramps. It's really terrific for stomach ulcers. Comfrey and calendula together is fantastic for stomach ulcers. Because calendula kills the bacteria, the Heliobacter pylori, that's causing the ulcer, and then the two of them, and it decreases the inflammation, and the comfrey accelerates the healing. So it's really a great combination for the ulcers. Plus, the comfrey has the mucilage in it, which is soothing. So nice combination. Calendula is also good for menstrual cramps. Don't take it if you're pregnant. By the way, typically, not always, but typically, plants that are good for menstrual cramps shouldn't be taken during pregnancy because, we don't want to be messing with the uterus if you got somebody living in there. But this plant, calendula, is also very good for shingles, topically and internally. So just really a great plant. And they're cute. I mean, why would you not have this growing on your place? They're really the cutest little bugs. It's a little bit touchy to grow this one. These seeds, the calendula seeds, have to be planted near dirt or they won't grow at all. Okay, so the sidewalk crack is okay, but the actual concrete of the sidewalk is not. They won't grow there, but they will grow anywhere else. Okay, and so, and the seeds have little spines on them, so you'll step on them and they'll stick to your sneakers and you'll have calendula everywhere. But it's okay because it's so cute and so delightful and you won't care. It's an annual, but it's a self-seeding annual, so if you let some of the flowers go to seed and drop off, then you'll have it next year, and you'll never get rid of it. It'll be there forever, and you don't have to ever plant it again. but really a wonderful plant. Full sun, partial sun is fine too, but it really likes the sun. If you put it in full sun, it'll be just great. Really easy to grow, super good plant. Now, to harvest calendula, it's the flower is the medicine, right? And that's always nice. I like it when the flower is the medicine, because then you don't have to dig the rascals up, and that, you're not killing the plants. So just go out there late morning, early afternoon, when the flowers are really big and full and happy, lop their heads off, dry them, grind them up, put them in a jar, and then you've got your calendula. All right, the next plant we're going to talk about is chamomile, and this is another flower that has some really remarkable properties. So, with chamomile, the flower is the medicine, and essentially chamomile is a calming nervine, okay? So it's really great for calming the nerves, sedating the nerves, so it has a lot of applications related to that property. It's really good for insomnia. It's really good for panic attacks and anxiety in some people. It's really good for pain, some kinds of pain. You can make a lotion for rashes and stuff that are really irritated and inflamed, and it'll have a calming effect on those. Or you can take it internally for pain, sciatica, those kinds of things. Really can be very helpful for nerve pain especially. It also has some antibacterial properties. It's got anti-inflammatory properties. It's got antifungal properties. It's good for menstrual cramps. It's also a good liver tonic. It can be used as a digestive bitter to help with digestion. It's really fantastic for anything wrong with your guts, because it's just so soothing and relaxing, especially like diarrhea, where you're getting all these spasms and grumpy guts. Chamomile really is my first grab for any kind of a GI thing. And I'll combine it with other stuff, but it's always in that formula. But even by itself, a chamomile tea will calm a lot of gut problems. It's also, and this is interesting, a kidney restorative. Okay, so there's a lot of herbs that are kidney tonics. In other words, they make you pee more. They make the kidney do what the kidney's supposed to do. But there's a few herbs that heal and support and really restore the kidneys. And chamomile is one of those. Nettle seed is another good one. Astragalus, Romania. There's some others. But chamomile is really quite good for that. So, how do you grow chamomile? Well, it's really easy to grow. It grows really easily from seed. Just put it in your flower beds and let it go. There's German chamomile, which is an annual, and there's Roman chamomile, which is a perennial, and it doesn't matter which one you use medicinally, they're the same. But they'll grow just about anywhere. Full sun, partial sun, they're just happy to go. And they'll produce a lot of flowers all year. You can go out and harvest them, and they'll keep producing through the season. You want to gather the flowers again when they're wide open, late morning, early afternoon, and you can buy those chamomile rakes, and they always work better in the ad than they do in real life. But they're better than nothing. I would like somebody to invent a really great one. I haven't found a really great one yet, but they can be handy. Okay, mallow. You got this one growing in your lawn? This is a wonderful plant. It's a cousin of marshmallow, which is another, you could replace this one with marshmallow, and it would be just great. Hollyhock is also a cousin of those guys and has similar properties. But mallow is really a great plant. The whole plant's edible. They use this for a salad green in Europe. We spray it with 2,4-D in America. We like sauce on our salad. But anyway, the whole plant's edible. The flowers make a little round thing after it flowers, and they call them cheesies because it looks like a little cheese round, and kids like to eat those. The root's edible, the whole thing's edible. But it's also medicinal. The whole plant's medicinal. And it has a lot of mucilage in it. So it's really soothing. It's really great for bronchitis, for bladder inflammations or bladder infections, for anything wrong with your gastrointestinal tract. Mallow is just fantastic. But the thing I really like it for, and marshmallow and mallow both, I really like for gangrene. And I've used it a lot over the years in the veterinary practice. A dog will come in and, it's had some kind of wound and they didn't take care of it, and they start getting a line, where everything on the other side of that line is going to die and fall off. That's gangrene. And if you get marshmallow on that topically and in them internally, in 12 hours, that line's always gone. You know, I've never had that not turn around. There's just something about marshmallow and mallow that just, you know, they go in and they just tell the cells, look, everything's going to be okay. No one has to die today, you know, and they believe her. I don't know, I don't know why, but it's really great medicine for that application. So, how do you grow mallow? Well, stop spraying your lawn. You'll have mallow next year, right? It's very easy to grow. Marshmallow too. Grows super easy from seed. The marshmallow is a tall plant, a really pretty plant. And the mallow is sort of a low to the ground weed. But either of those, they're identical medicinally. Really, really easy to grow anywhere. Harvesting mallow, a really great way to harvest mallow is to tell your kids they're wildcrafting instead of pulling weeds, right? Johnny, if you're nice to your sister, we'll go wildcrafting later, right? It only works once on the smart kids, but it's worth doing. But seriously, just dig up the roots. You can collect the greens anytime. And the roots are stronger, much stronger for the medicinal properties, but super easy to grow. Cramp bark. So this is Viburnum opulus. And yeah, this is the snowball bush that everybody's got growing in their flower beds. The bark is the medicine. And cramp bark is an antispasmodic, all right? And so it relaxes muscle spasms. And so, well, what would you use that for? Well, you would use that anywhere that you have a muscle spasm, you know, whether it's a muscle spasm in your back, whether it's a uterine cramp. In fact, it's quite good for threatened miscarriage, you know, because it relaxes the uterus. Just quit cramping. We don't want to do that. It's also good for, like, if you get a really dry, hacky, aggravated cough and you're just miserable, the cramp bark will relax all that stuff and make that better. It's good for asthma, same thing, right? We're just going to relax those muscles, get those airways open. So any kind of a application where making the muscles less tense would be better, that's a good application for cramp bark. In fact, I use a little cramp bark or some kind of an antispasmodic. You could also use gumweed or lobelia or any of those others. But I often put that in my herb formulas just to sort of help everything relax so the tissues can get perfused better and the herbs can get absorbed better. So you can go to your local nursery and buy a Viburnum opulus bush. By the way, if you live in the southeastern states, black haw is a cousin of cramp bark and works just the same way. Okay, so if you're in that neck of the woods, but the way, you know, these are common shrubs and they're real aggressive, busy. You know, you got to prune them every year, which is perfect because that's what herbalists want, right? We need material, and so every spring you can harvest your cramp bark. Go out there, thin the shrub a little bit because they'll get great big. You know, prune it back and thin it out a little and get it how you want it, and then take those canes in and cut the inner bark off of them and dry it, throw it in a jar. You got your cramp bark for the year. Cramp bark also makes a berry, which is edible, but it's not great. Okay, but anyway, I suppose if you put enough sugar in it, you could make jelly. So our next plant is plantain, Plantago major, and this is plantain, the little weed in your lawn, not plantain the banana from the Caribbean. And you know, that brings up an interesting point. When you're searching for information on herbs on the internet or in other resources, it's really helpful and actually pretty important to use the Latin name of that plant. You know, plantain's a perfect example. Bergamot's another example. There's two herbs that are called bergamot. One is Monarda fistulosa, and one is a little citrus fruit from, you know, Malaysia or somewhere. I don't know where it's from, Indonesia. Anyway, the essential oil comes from this little citrus fruit, but the other one is in the mint family, and it has completely different medicinal properties. So anyway, we're talking about Plantago major, and plantain's a really tremendous plant. It has some really great properties. The leaf is the medicine. The whole upper plant really is the medicine. And the seed hulls from plantain, from members of that genus Plantago, are where we get psyllium from. So you can use the seed husks from any of the plantains the way you would use psyllium, just sort of as a bulking laxative. There are species that are better than our little Plantago major for that, for producing that stuff. But you know, in a pinch, that's something you can do. Also, the leaf is medicinal for the principal purposes of our use and discussion today. It can be used internally or topically, and the nice thing about plantain is that it's kind of mild in all of its properties, and sometimes less is more, and that's a really important characteristic of plantain. For example, it's an antibiotic, but it's a mild antibiotic, so it's really useful for gastrointestinal things because it can go in there and do its job without being really disruptive of the whole microflora of the gut. You know, it's a vulnerary, and a vulnerary is the funky herbalist word for a plant that accelerates healing, like comfrey does, and calendula, and some of the others we've talked about. But plantain has that property too, but in a very mild way again. And so, well, why is that good? Why is less more there? Well, it's because if you put comfrey on a puncture wound, that's a problem, because it'll heal that little orifice up, and then now we have an abscess, right? And so plantain, because it acts more gradually and more gently, will still accelerate the healing, but it does it in a less rapid way. And so you can put comfrey on a puncture wound, and it'll heal it from the inside out more gradually, like it should heal, but still decrease the overall healing time. The other neat thing about plantain and puncture wounds is that plantain has tremendous drawing power, so it's good for pulling stuff out of wounds. And it's also good for pulling toxins and poisons out of the body in other ways. A very common use of plantain is for mosquito bites and bee stings and things like that. And you know, you can just chew up the leaves and make a spit poultice and put it on a mosquito bite or a bee sting or a wasp sting, and it'll, you know, pull that venom out and give you relief immediately. It does the same thing for more serious envenomations, like rattlesnake bites and hobo and brown recluse bites. Really can pull those toxins out, help your body eliminate them. It draws them out locally, but it's also a good diuretic, so it helps your bladder and your eliminating organs to get rid of those toxins internally as well. Just as an example of a case with a pretty significant toxicity, I had a fellow come in several years ago that had been bitten by a dog on the hand, breaking up a dog fight. Don't break up dog fights. Let them fight and then take them to the vet and let them get sewed up. But don't get in the middle of that, because you're going to get bitten. Anyway, this guy was breaking up this dog fight, and he got bitten on the hand. Pretty severe bite. And he was a man, so of course, you know, he didn't go to the doctor. I mean, why would you do that, right? But anyway, after a week or so, that hand started looking really bad, and by the time I saw him, his hand was about that thick, and he had purple streaks going up his arm. So I guess now it's time to go to the doctor. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you know, put him on an antibiotic, which was a great idea. But then the doctor said, look, if you don't find a good herbalist, you're going to lose that hand. I got nothing for you. I mean, we can kill the bugs, but you got tissue issues here that pharmaceuticals can't help. And so he didn't know a good herbalist, but he knew me. So he came and saw me, and you know, it was plantain that we used on that case. And you know, I made a plantain poultice just from the dried plantain, ground and dried. And if I'd had fresh plantain, that would have been all the better. But you know, we added the water to the powder, made a poultice, and put it on. I gave him plantain internally. He was taking a couple of teaspoons of that 3 or 4 times a day. And I gave him other things too. I mean, I gave him echinacea, and I gave him things to stimulate immunity, and you know, sort of the kinds of things you'd expect. But within 24 hours, that hand was completely normal. I mean, it still had holes in it from the dog, but all the swelling was gone, the purple streaks were gone, and you know, it really did a great job on him. Now, you know, you say, well, was it just the antibiotics? So, no, it wasn't. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of cases where there weren't any antibiotics, and the plantain does great. And I'm not opposed to antibiotics, and I think that in that case, you know, that's a tool that was a terrific tool for him, an important tool, and so, you know, super, let's, you know, go ahead and use those. But like I say, I've seen other cases where we didn't use those and had the same outcome just with the herbs. And so I know the power of plantain to pull toxins out In cases of sepsis, which is a systemic bacterial infection, in cases of toxicity, in cases of envenomations from spiders and snakes. I have another friend of mine who's a wilderness survival guy, and he was out here not too far from here out in the canyons, and was climbing this canyon wall by the river, and he reaches up and he gets bit on the hand by a rattlesnake. And he was 4 days walk from nowhere, no cell phone, no car, no nothing. And so he's got a big problem. And so he said that his hand swelled up great big, so it wasn't a dry bite. And he went down to the creek bottom, found a big patch of plantain, and just ate it and ate it and ate it all that day, and would make spit poultices, chewing up the leaves and putting them on that bite wound. And he said after a couple hours they would turn black, and he'd take it off and chew up some more and put it on there. And he managed that snake bite all through that day in that way. And, within 24 hours, that hand was looking really good. He had no tissue loss whatsoever from that rattlesnake bite, which is crazy. I mean, he should have lost that hand. He should have lost his life. But, he knew what weed could help him, and so he was fortunate. But that's the power of these plants, is they really have remarkable abilities, and if we would just know what those are and employ them in our lives, they really can help us a lot. So plantain's great. It's really good for wounds. It's really good for envenomations and bites and stings, like we said. Really good for bladder infections. Really good for any time you want to get poisons and things out of the body. Just a tremendous plant. Like we said, the leaf is the medicine. The whole upper plant is the medicine. It doesn't have enough roots to talk about. I would suppose those are fine too. But anyway, really a terrific plant. So growing plantain's pretty easy. You may very well have it in your yard already. Go look in your lawn. Look in the shady kind of cooler parts of your lawn, and you'll find plantain maybe. And if you don't, get some seed and plant it in your garden. It's a hardy little happy guy. It likes to grow, and it'll grow in full sun if you give it enough water. All of our plantain beds here on the property are in full sun, and they're, we get great big beautiful plantains. But it needs enough water to do that. But if it has its choice, it'll go to a cool shady place in the lawn. Obviously, if you're taking stuff out of your lawn, you want to watch. You don't want to have dogs and herbal medicines in the same lawn, right? Dog pee is not medicinal, and so make sure stuff's clean. But otherwise, really a terrific plant, easy to harvest. And the leaf is the medicine, so just gather the leaves. One other thing to know about plantain is it's a little bit delicate. Some of the medicinal constituents are a little bit sensitive, and so it doesn't have a super long shelf life as a dry herb. Most dry herbs, I'd say, if you grew them yourself, they're probably good for 2 years, maybe more. Certainly good for a year. But plantain, maybe 6 months. And so fresh plantain is the best resource. And one way that you can store plantain and have it fresh and available all the time is to freeze it. Freezing doesn't damage the medicinal constituents at all. Or you can even juice it or grind it up and put it in ice cube trays, keep it in the freezer. And then, or just put it in a bag like frozen spinach, just the leaves. But that's a good way to have it on hand all the time. Or, I use the dry plantain all the time. I use the dry herb all the time. I just don't keep it very long, But we go through stuff here fast enough that it's not an issue for me, Our plantain, very few of our herbs get old on the shelf here. But if you're going to keep plantain in a dry form, I would say maybe 6 months. And again, it depends sort of on which medicinal constituents you're talking about. And we, there's a module on the website, homegrownherbalist.net, just about plantain. And we get into a lot of detail about all the different medicinal constituents and who's tough and who's a sissy and what'll last and what won't. But anyway, plantain's a really, really terrific plant. Okay, cayenne pepper. Now this is a plant that really is tremendous. Has a great reputation in herbal medicine for good reasons. And personally, in my practice, I've probably saved more animals in the veterinary practice more dramatically with cayenne than I have with all the other herbs combined. It's a premier crisis herb, really tremendous for shock, for blood loss, I can have a dog come into the clinic that's been hit by a car, and his gums are white and his eyes are rolled back in his head, and he's not very responsive, and he's down at the end of the tunnel talking to the big white dog about his life, that dog, and really in trouble. And I squirt a little cayenne tincture in those guys, and boom, they are back. Their gums are pink, they're alert, their breathing's better, their heart rate's better. It's just a really great herb for shock, and for those kinds of crises, heart attack, shock, big physical trauma. I use it, sometimes I get a dog that's having an anesthesia reaction, or a dog that won't come out of anesthesia as quickly as I'd like to. Little cayenne in there, they're waking up faster. I use it on little C-section puppies, because they're coming out of the womb anesthetized, right? Because I had to knock mom out to do the C-section. And so they come out and they're all sleepy and groggy and don't want to breathe. And I put a couple of drops of cayenne in their mouth and say, "Hey, welcome to Idaho," right? And they go, "Oh, I don't like Idaho," right? But it wakes them up, and it's very stimulating. The pepper is the medicine. And it can be any hot pepper. It doesn't have to be cayenne peppers per se. But the heat is the medicine. So the hotter it is, the more medicinal it is. The capsaicin is the active ingredient that has the medicinal properties. And so the pepper is the medicine, and you can use those fresh. You can dry them. You can tincture them. Like all the other herbs, you can make whatever form you want. It's good for internal bleeding. It's good for bleeding topically. It can be a little zingy, but it's not a deal breaker, and it also has some properties that actually numb the nerves. So even though you put that on topically, it's a little zingy initially, it actually will numb those nerves and decrease pain. You can make a lotion out of cayenne and put it on, arthritis and sore joints and stuff, and it does two things. It's very warming, which improves the circulation, and that helps pain. But also, it has that chemistry in it that, deadens the nerves, numbs the nerves for a little while. So that's good for the pain. Let's see, what else is cayenne good for? Cayenne is really good for blood pressure, high or low. Well, how does that work? Well, it works because what it's actually doing is making your blood vessels more elastic, right? And so when you have high blood pressure, they stretch better because they're more elastic, and so your pressure goes down. When you have low blood pressure, they contract better because they're more elastic, and your pressure goes up to where it's supposed to be. And so it's really good for blood pressure. Let's see, bleeding, blood pressure. It's good for sinus congestion. And if you don't believe me, just put a little cayenne in your mouth, and we'll make a believer out of you right quick. It'll just drain everything out of you. And again, it's that heat. So don't put it in a capsule, right? If you're trying to get the sinus risk clearing benefits, or if you're treating somebody in a shocky situation, or if you're, it's also a really good expectorant for getting stuff out of your lungs. You can't put it in a capsule for any of those properties, because the heat, that physiological intense response to the heat, is the curative property, right? Now, if you're taking it for your blood pressure, go ahead and put it in a capsule. Who cares? But if you need the intensity of the cayenne, if the cayenne's doing something above your waist, you probably need to not be putting it in a capsule. So anyway, again, great for shock, heart attack, sinus congestion, phlegm, gunk in your lungs, blood pressure. Just a tremendous plant. Bleeding, really a good plant. And there's no contraindications. Maybe I would be a little careful with high doses in a pregnant lady, because it's really stimulating, and we don't want to be too stimulating with pregnant ladies ever. But other than that, I just don't worry. I use it a lot. Growing cayenne is really easy. Just go to the nursery and buy some little cayenne pepper plants and poke them in your garden like you do any pepper or tomato, any of those guys. Really simple to grow. You can grow it from seed also, and they're hardy, durable little guys, and they'll produce peppers for you all summer. So when the peppers are red, they're ready to harvest, and you harvest them. I usually just dry them. And we dry all our herbs. We just dry them on racks. There's no heat or anything. The air movement is more important than the heat. And heat can actually be pretty detrimental. And we do all our drying indoors, because if you do them outdoors in the sun, it completely ruins the herbs. The sun is the worst thing in the world for herbs. And if you put them under the trees, the birds poop on them, right? And so we're doing that all indoors. But, just throw the peppers on a rack. If you wanted to use like a little food dehydrator, you could do that. I would turn the heat all the way off and just let the air blow through them. And another point about the cayenne is, if you're using it for cooking and eating, a lot of people scrape the seeds out because that's the hottest part, right? And it can be a little much. But if you're using it for medicine, you want the seeds. So take the whole pepper, grind it up, seeds and all, and use that. All right, has anybody seen this plant? This is a pretty important medicinal plant too, dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. And look, there's our friend again, officinale. And again, this is a medicinal plant with a long history of medicinal use. The whole plant's edible. The greens, the flowers, the roots. The greens are a little better in the spring. It gets pretty bitter when it gets hotter outside. But lots of vitamin A, lots of vitamin C, lots of vitamin E, and lots of potassium, which is really great because one of the really important medicinal properties of dandelion is that it's a good diuretic, right? So a diuretic is a chemical that tells your kidneys, let more water go. Your kidney's job is to keep water in your body. A diuretic said, look, lighten up, guys, let some of this water go. So you pee more, all right? So it's good for bladder infections. It's good because it flushes it out. It's good for edema or swelling, fluid retention. Even like congestive heart failure where you're trying to get fluid out. Those kinds of applications, anytime you want to get fluid out of the body and increase urination, dandelion's a good choice. But, physicians really worry about potassium depletion when they're using a diuretic, because when you're urinating, you're losing potassium. And so, they often will supplement the potassium, and they're really watching those people when they're on Lasix or those kinds of medications. Well, God, when he made his diuretic, he put a lot of potassium in it because he's really smart, right? And so we have this beautifully designed medicine that not only is it a good diuretic, but it's a great source of the minerals and vitamins and nutrients that you lose through diuresis. And so just a lovely package. He's pretty smart. Maybe we should listen to him about some other things. But anyway, dandelion's a great plant. The leaf and the root are both medicinal. It's a good kidney tonic, and it's also a good liver tonic. And the leaf tends to favor the kidneys, so the leaf's a little more diuretic, and the root tends to favor the liver, although they both do both. The liver function is that it stimulates bile production and bile flow. So it's a good liver cleanser. It helps digestion because bile is important for digestion. Cases of jaundice where you got liver stagnation and congestion, dandelion's great. I've turned around some pretty significant jaundice cases with dandelion root. Really a great medicine. There's also some kind of exciting research going on right now with dandelion and breast cancer. It apparently has some very specific activity against breast cancer, and so that's exciting. We're learning new stuff all the time about these plants. So dandelions is just a terrific little plant. Start being nice to it. The name dandelion comes from the French dent de lion, and that means the teeth of the lion, right? And it just refers to the leaf, those little serrated, lion-y looking leaves they have. It looks like lion's teeth. But anyway, growing dandelions is pretty easy. What you need to do is grasp the stem firmly between your fingers, pucker up, and blow, and you'll have good success growing these plants. And you'll also be able to spread those to your neighbors and so that they can have medicinal plants in their yards, and they'll appreciate that. Harvesting, they're just dandelions, guys. Pull them out, use them. There's all kinds of tools you can get, dandelion diggers and stuff. And this is another situation where it's really great to incorporate your children and have them do a little wildcrafting with you. The nice thing about being an herbalist is it completely changes your paradigm about weeds. Now we see the mallow and we see the dandelion, and these are our friends, right? And so when you're pulling the dandelions and you don't get the whole root, instead of cussing and digging and trying to get all that out, as an herbalist, you just say, see you later, right? Because it's a perennial plant. It'll come right back from that piece of root. And so that's good. That makes you happier as an herbalist than it does as a gardener. So dandelions, really a tremendous plant. Use them in your diet. In the spring, put a lot of little dandelion greens in your smoothies and in your salads and stuff. And it just has a great cleansing, rejuvenating effect on you, to get all that winter sludge out of your system and get geared up for spring. Dandelion is a tremendous resource nutritionally and medicinally. All right, yarrow. This is another really super plant. This is another one that if I only had 5, This is one of the 82 plants that would be on that list of 5 I wouldn't want to live without. Yarrow is Achillea millefolium. Achillea comes from the Greek hero's name, Achilles. And Achilles was apparently taught about yarrow and how to use it by Chiron the centaur, who was a great physician. He's probably a good veterinarian too, because he's half horse. But anyway, they used to carry yarrow into battle. The Greeks would carry a bag of yarrow and they would pack it into their wounds when they got skewered by the Phoenicians or whoever else was skewering Greeks in those days. And it would stop the bleeding. And it's tremendous internally or topically for stopping bleeding. I mean, really good. And even up until the First World War, soldiers were carrying yarrow for that purpose. One of the common names for yarrow is soldier wort. And wort is the Old English word for plant. So, you have St. John's wort and fig wort and mother wort and soldier wort, and so that just means plant. So the soldier plant was something that they would carry into battle to stop bleeding. It also has, and I've seen that, how many thousand times in my veterinary practice, where I'll get a dog that's been hit by a car and gushing blood. Really from the nose and the mouth, really in trouble. And I squirt a little cayenne tincture in there, and man, they are done bleeding. It's like flipping a switch. And really very effective. I also have a little jar of the powdered yarrow. It's actually yarrow and shepherd's purse, which is another good one for stopping bleeding. Just a little jar of that powdered herb, and I keep it by my oral surgery table. So when I'm doing oral surgery on a dog and cutting a tooth out, you're cutting the bone, because dogs' teeth have huge roots. It's like taking a wisdom tooth out of a human. You don't just pull them out. You got to cut the bone to get them out. And when you're cutting that bone, you'll hit those little arteries in the bone, and they just bleed like little devils, and you can't stop it, because you can't tie them off and you can't clamp them, and because they're in the bone. And so the medical procedure for that is to stick your thumb on it and pray for about 20 minutes, and then you just repeat as needed, and they're horrible. And so I just put a little bit of that yarrow powder, that ground up herb, right on that bleeder, and they just quit bleeding. And it's also great for the wound. It's antimicrobial, kills bacteria. It's anti-inflammatory. It has very similar properties in that respect to calendula. So really effective. The flower is the medicine. And let's see, what else is it good for? It's good for menstrual cramps. It's good for fevers, really good at breaking a fever. And a fever is a body process that's antibacterial in itself. What your body's trying to do is it elevates the temperature, and as the temperature rises, it becomes more difficult for bacteria to bind with iron and other minerals and nutrients that they need, and so they get weak and wore out, and their white blood cells can go in and kill them. And so the fever is an immune response, to fight the bacteria. So if you take ibuprofen to knock your fever down, you're helping the bugs, right? You're a traitor in that war that your body's having, helping the other side. If you take yarrow, it also gets rid of the fever, but it gets rid of the fever by accentuating it and making it do what it was supposed to do in the first place, helping it do it faster and more effectively. And so, if you're coming down with something, if you're sick, you take some hot yarrow tea and you wrap up in a blanket, and it has what's called a diaphoretic effect. It makes you hot and sweat, and it actually improves and accentuates that fever very short term, and then you're done. It breaks the fever because the fever's done doing what it was supposed to do. And so yarrow breaks the fever in a positive way by helping your body do what it's trying to do, instead of suppressing symptoms and stopping your body from doing the things it needs to do to help itself. So good for fevers, really good for colds and flus and respiratory things. It stops bleeding internally or topically. Good for menstrual cramps. The root of yarrow, and it's the flower and the leaf that we're doing all those things with, but the root is also good for dental pain. It's a local anesthetic. And so you can grind up the root, or take the powder, or take a tincture of the root and put it on a cotton ball and put it on a sore tooth, and it's really very effective, almost as effective as Novocaine. And so that's something that you can do, and that's the old Boy Scout trick. They'll be out hiking through the woods, and the older guys will get the younger guys to chew on the yarrow root, and they talk like this for the rest of the day, because their mouth's so numb. But really terrific for that. Cloves is also really good for that. If you have cloves, just the cloves that are in your spice drawer, grind those up and put them on a sore tooth, and really very effective for pain. That's what dentists used to use until not too long ago. My receptionist, my vet tech actually in the clinic, she doesn't like the smell of cloves because they remind her of the dentist, you know. And so that's a really effective thing too, that yarrow root or the cloves for dental pain. Do not take yarrow if you're pregnant. It can cause miscarriage. And so again, any herb that's really good for uterine cramping, with the exception of cramp bark, I would probably avoid those if you're pregnant, because we don't want to bother the uterus when somebody's living in there, right? And so don't take it if you're pregnant. But other than that, that's the only contraindication that I'm aware of. So growing yarrow is really easy. These are beautiful little flowers, really nice. And you can use any of the color strains you want. The white one is the wild yarrow, right? But, you know, go to the nursery. They got yellow yarrow and red yarrow and pink yarrow, and they got all these beautiful varieties and cultivars of yarrow, and they all work medicinally. We've, you know, we have all of those colors growing on our property, and I use them all interchangeably. I don't see any difference at all for any of the properties. So feel free to, you know, plant a variety and enjoy the colors. And it's just a beautiful plant. It's an enthusiastic plant. Sometimes it'll jump the borders a little bit and get into the bed you didn't mean it to be in, but it's really beautiful and great medicinally. It's also, sometimes it'll get a little bit root bound because it really grows. You know, sometimes you got to go in there and thin it out. But if you're an herbalist, you're thinning it out anyway, right? Because you want those roots for dental pain cases. So when you're harvesting yarrow, you want to take when the flower's in bloom, and wait until late morning or early afternoon when it's really in bloom. You know, when all that stuff's in the flowers. Then I just harvest like the top quarter of the plant or the top third of the plant, and so the leaf and the flower in that upper part of the plant, and that won't traumatize the plants, and they'll come back and they'll make more flowers. They'll make flowers for you all summer. All right, so that's it. There you have 10 herbs, your new 10 best friends. And you know, these plants really are amazing. I've been using them, as I said, every day for many, many years in the veterinary practice and the naturopathy practice, and I'm just astounded all the time at the amazing things that they can do. You can use these plants, you can have relationships with these plants. Start planting some of these. Go get some seeds or go get some plants, and just get going on this. Have some of these new best friends in your yard to help you when you need them. We'd love to have you swing by the website if you'd like to learn more, homegrownherbalist.net. There's videos and there's blog articles and there's herbs you can buy. You can buy a copy of my book, The Homegrown Herbalist, if you like. In fact, I would recommend you buy several copies of that book because, you know, you could read one book and it could be really great, but it might just be a fluke. But if you bought several copies and they were all good, well, you know, that's a good book, right? But anyway, those are available there. Look for our medicine making series that we've done with Marjorie. That's an in-depth program that'll be on her site, and we had a lot of fun putting that together, and I think you'll enjoy that too. I'm Dr. Patrick Jones from the Homegrown Herbalist School. Thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for making this a priority, learning about these things in your life. I think the more people that understand these basic things that our grandmas knew how to do, the better the world's going to be, and the better off we're all going to be. Thanks very much, Dr. Patrick Jones, and you have a great day.
So as Dr. Jones mentioned, he and I are working on a product together where we're going to be making a kit that will turn you into a medicine man or a medicine woman, and it will have all the things that you need in a step-by-step fashion along with video tutorials, but all the pieces that you'll need in order to be able to make a whole variety of different medicines and use them. That's going to be coming up in about a month or two. We're working like crazy on the product development.